guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to my channel. Today is kind of the first video in my true crime series that is a solved case. If you've watched my previous videos, you would know I've done about 3 missing persons cases, but today's case is actually one that is solved. I decided that I wanted to do this video just because I find this case to be extremely frustrating and heartbreaking, and just it made me really angry while I was researching it. A friend had told me about this case a little while back, and so I decided to do some research on it, and I just couldn't believe how I had never heard of this case before, considering how popular it was when this all happened. I am talking to you guys today about the case of Laci Peterson. This case, you guys, like I said, is very frustrating, very heartbreaking, and there are a lot of details that go into this case that if I were to sit here and tell you all of them, it would take days. I cannot fit them all into one video, so if you're interested in this case, I definitely recommend going and doing some more research on it. There are a ton of documentaries out about this case in specifics. I know that this video is going to be very long already, so I don't want to waste too much time talking about it, but if I do leave anything out that you want mentioned, make sure to leave it in the comments below. And like I say with all these types of videos, regardless if it's a missing persons case or a solved case, these are real people and real families that went through very, very traumatic and heartbreaking experiences, so just please be respectful in the comments below and try to think about that. Now, with all that being said, let's move on into what happened to Laci Peterson. Laci Peterson was born in Modesto, California. She was described as a ball of energy, always super positive, upbeat, just really fun to be around. She went to college at Cal Poly St. Louis Obispo in California, and this is where she met Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson's from the San Diego area, and he is described as a super charming, charismatic type of guy, very savvy, but also very just sincere and a straightforward type of person, and he just kind of has that look of the all-American guy. At the time, Scott was working at a restaurant as a waiter, and one day Laci walked in, and that is how the two of them met. Friends and family automatically say from the get-go it was love at first sight, automatically head over heels for each other. They both shared the same dream of becoming successful and having a family, settling down, having kind of the American dream type of life. Scott and Laci got married on August 9th of 1997, and after that they moved back to Modesto, California. That way they could be close to Laci's family when they decided to start their own. Laci got a job as a substitute teacher, and Scott also worked as a salesperson for a fertilizing company, and they seemed to be living the perfect life according to everyone around them. They said that they had the perfect marriage, never fought, never had any problems. You would never think that they would have any relationship or marital issues. That all changed on December 24th of 2002, Christmas Eve, when Laci Peterson went missing. According to Scott, him and Laci woke up around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and he said that Laci turned on her favorite show, which was Martha Stewart, and they were both watching that. Scott said that Laci had planned to take their dog for a walk earlier in that morning, and then after that she was gonna go grocery shopping and just kind of prepare for Christmas Eve that night, as well as Christmas Day the following morning. Scott had said that instead of doing these things with his wife, he decided to go fishing for a little while that morning. He went to the Berkeley Marina, which was nearby the San Francisco Bay. He said that he went out onto the water for about roughly an hour and a half before he decided to come in and drive home. This is where things get questionable. Scott drives home a little while later, and when he gets home, he noticed that Laci was nowhere to be found. He said that the dog was there, the dog that she had supposedly taken on a walk earlier that day, but Laci was not, and he said that he thought that she was just not home at the time, so he decided to take a shower, throw some clothes in the laundry, to get a bite to eat, and then he decided to call Laci's parents to ask if they knew where she was. The weird thing about this phone call is when Scott first initially called Laci's parents, it was her mother and her stepfather, he initially told them that Laci is missing. That is a little odd. The wording in that is very strange. Missing is a very important, crucial word. So to flat out say when her parents answer the phone, just to say that Laci's missing, that's very questionable. Laci's mom described getting describing this phone call as the most heart-wrenching feeling because not only could no one find her daughter was also 8 months pregnant with her and Scott's first child. Laci's stepfather Ron decides to call 911 immediately and immediately files a missing persons report telling them that his son-in-law had called and said his wife went for a walk with their dog and the dog came home and she never did. And because she was 8 months pregnant, that heightened the urgency to find her that much more just because she would be needing medical attention very soon, considering the fact that she was so close to being like full term in her pregnancy. So the police department immediately sprang into action and searched the East La Loma Park, which is where Laci typically walked her dog. They searched the Petersons' house, they searched Laci's car, but they really couldn't find anything. When they searched the house, Laci's keys were in there. The car was completely clean. There was really nothing to go off of as far as that was concerned. And so the police immediately brought Scott in for questioning, not as much as a suspect. They didn't suspect him as a suspect at that point. They just kind of wanted to get a timeline of the whole thing and kind of hear his side of the story. So Scott essentially told the police everything that I had just told you. That was Scott's story. That's what Scott said had happened. And I watched the interview with Scott. You can find it on YouTube. And it is important to note that people do handle traumatic situations and just handle situations in general differently. However, this struck everyone as a little odd, just considering the fact that he basically had no emotion. He was so cool, calm, collected, played the part so well throughout this entire case basically, but especially in the initial interview of just a very like told him what happened and was basically like, can I go? And the lead investigator in this case, the investigator that did interview Scott Peterson, said that it did strike him as odd when the interview was over because typically, you know, if your wife or your husband or your loved one is missing and the interview is over, he said typically the interviews end with, can I have your card? Are you going to call me? What's next? Where are you going to search? Like it follows up with questions from the person whose loved one is missing basically. And the investigator said that Scott basically just walked out, no questions asked. He did agree to take a polygraph in the initial interview that he had. He said that he would take one the following day or a couple days following that. They were going to try to set it up. But following that, the police did a follow-up phone call asking to schedule a polygraph, which he then declined to take. Police were searching everywhere at this point. They were searching on horseback, they were searching in helicopters, they were doing everything they could to try to find Laci. Surprisingly enough though, the one person who was not doing everything and anything that they could to find Laci, so it seemed, was Scott Peterson. Scott was very behind the camera, did not want to be in the media spotlight at all, stayed very low-key, very under the radar. He had cameras on his house 24/7 with the media and the news reporters because once his story hit the news, you guys, it spread like a wildfire. Like it spread so quickly all across the country because if you think about it, the successful young woman who's pregnant goes missing on Christmas Eve. It's very alarming and it really just hit with everyone in America and everyone wanted to find Laci. According to Laci's friends, they would kind of set up these hotlines and in the hotline rooms they would kind of put pictures of Laci all over and pictures of Laci and Scott, and whenever Scott would come in the room and see a picture of Laci and him, he would immediately just take the picture down and just say, I don't want that up there, I don't want to see that. Which, I mean, it's weird. It's just, he was acting weird. But keep in mind, like I said, Scott and Laci didn't really have, to what family and friends could see, any relationship problems at all. Scott and Laci seemed like the picture perfect couple to everyone. So even Laci's family at this time was defending Scott, saying that Scott would never ever do something like this. They know Scott, they trust Scott, Scott loved Laci and would never ever do anything to hurt her. The police were really starting to hit a dead end in this case until a tip came in that gave them the hope and potential that this could lead somewhere. According to the person who left the tip, there had been a burglary in Scott and Laci's neighborhood the day that she had disappeared. Apparently the couple that lived in the home had left for vacation on the 24th and they came back the 26th and noticed that their house had been vandalized and broken into. So police thought, what if the person or people who broke into this house who did the burglary saw Laci? What if Laci saw them? They didn't want Laci to talk. They kidnapped her, they abducted her, drove her away and are holding her hostage or did God knows what because she saw them commit this crime. However, this theory was short-lived because they did find the men that committed the crime. While they admitted to being responsible for the burglary itself, they said they had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance and they don't have her, they don't know who has her, and they just aren't responsible for that at all. So with that theory out of the way, police really were now back at square one again. They really were just kind of at a dead end until one day they received a phone call from a woman named Frey, who claimed to be dating Scott Peterson. This completely blew open the case because Scott, the all-American boy from the all-American family, was having an affair the entire time with this woman. Amber was a massage therapist and had met Scott through a mutual friend. The police immediately went to her house and interviewed her, and she showed them a picture of the two of them from her office Christmas party. She said, like I said, that they met through a mutual friend and there was an immediate attraction, an immediate click. He was super charming. Amber did tell him that she did have a daughter, a young daughter, and asked if Scott was married, was ever married, or had any kids. Scott immediately said no, he was not married, did not have any kids, and they just kind of continued their relationship from there. According to Amber, she found out about Laci Peterson through one of her friends who had called her and asked if she had heard about this Laci Peterson, who had apparently been married to Scott Peterson, the Scott Peterson she was dating. And what I'm about to tell you, you guys, to me is the most chilling, skin-crawling part of it all. On December 9th, so 2 weeks prior to Laci's disappearance, Amber and Scott were at her house. Scott said that he had something really important to tell Amber, and according to her, he immediately just kind of broke down and started apologizing and said that he was sorry, but he had lied to her because he was in fact once married. But this is going to be the first holiday season that he had spent without her. I just got chills saying that. This was 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, and he just told the person he's having an affair with that he is married, whatever he said, but this was going to be the first holiday season without her, and she goes missing 2 weeks later. Like, what? So together the police and Amber decide to come up with this plan to start recording her and Scott's phone calls. She said that he called her every single day, so the police asked her to start recording those phone calls. And on the day of Laci's candlelight vigil that was held, that Scott was at, he had called Amber and made up this elaborate, detailed story about how he was in Europe doing all this business and travel and all of this stuff, and he was literally at Laci's vigil. A question that I have, especially in this, is how did he not think that she wouldn't find out? This was all over the media, all over the news, all over the newsstands. How did he think this would not get back to her? He made up such elaborate lies. And this is when the police started to put two and two together that Scott can literally lie about anything. If he can lie about being in Europe while he's actually at his missing wife's vigil, then he can lie about anything. So this is when the police decide to really zone in and zero in on Scott. So Amber decided that she was going to come forward into the media and come clean with her and Scott's relationship for everyone, and the police decided that they wanted to personally sit down with Laci's parents before this story hit the news. That way they were prepared, and this is so heartbreaking. The police sat down with Laci's mom and stepdad and showed her the picture of Scott and Amber at her holiday work party. Laci's mom just broke down. She was hysterical and just immediately cried out, why did he have to kill her? So then on January 24th of 2003, there was a press conference held where Amber attended and just stated her entire relationship with Scott and stated that she did have a relationship with Scott. It was romantic and she had no idea about Laci. She was crying and it was really sad to watch. And she was never ruled as a suspect or a person of interest or anything like that, just because it was pretty clear that she was not involved at all in this. So after this press conference was held, Scott immediately became known as like the most hated man in America, essentially. Now let's go back to Scott's alibi and where Scott said he was and all of that, because I want to kind of dig deeper into that because it's important. This type of boat that Scott had, I don't know the exact name of it, but what I do know is that it was a freshwater boat. This was not a boat that should be on rough waters because the San Francisco Bay isn't the most smooth water surface. It can be extremely rough and extremely just not suitable for a freshwater boat, which is what Scott's boat was. So why put a freshwater boat into saltwater? I'm not a boat expert, I don't really know, but from the research I did, that was definitely a question that kept on coming up, is why would you put a freshwater boat into saltwater? That makes no sense. And just his story was just not adding up in general. Like I said, there were reporters all outside of the Peterson house at all times, and one day in the midst of all of the searching for Laci, a reporter had gone over to Scott's neighbor's house, and the neighbor told the reporter something thing that just also gives me chills. The neighbor told a reporter that the day that Laci went missing, Scott had gone over to her house and was wondering if Laci was there, and the neighbor asked him, like, it's Christmas Eve, what are you doing? Like, where were you? And he said that he was playing golf, which completely goes against his entire fishing alibi. So right then, it's very contradicting, and Scott just becomes completely uncredible. Because if you're gonna lie about your alibi, you completely become untrustworthy and uncredible on the spot. So more and more time kept on passing. Connor, which was the name of their unborn child, his due date had passed, and there was still no sign of Laci, no sign of Connor, no sign of anything. And Scott was acting like his wife was not coming home. He had sold her car, he was thinking about selling the house, just not things that you would typically do if you were on an active search for someone. So then the police completely veered their search area onto the San Francisco Bay. And unfortunately, the police ruled this case no longer as a missing persons case, but they were now expecting and just assuming that they were looking for a body, 2 bodies, and had kind of lost hope at this point that Laci would come back alive. On April 13th, the remains of a male fetus had washed up onto the shore of the San Francisco Bay, and on April 14th, the remains of what was once a woman also washed up onto the San Francisco Bay. The bodies were confirmed shortly after to be those of Laci and Connor Peterson. The state that their bodies were in, you guys, is indescribable. It's incredibly graphic. Out of respect, I'm going to keep that part private. If you want to know, you can look it up. It'll say it. And this is when they just set out on a search for Scott. They had GPS'd his car because they didn't want him to get away. They knew that they had their guy. These bodies washed up coincidentally at the same place that Scott said that he was. That's not a coincidence. His wife and his unborn son washed up onto the shore of where he was fishing in his boat. That's not a coincidence. And so the police set out, went to look for him, found him, pulled him over. In the car, they found $15,000 worth of cash, camping materials, snorkeling materials, his brother's driver's license, a knife, all the things that would lead you to believe that he was preparing to just disappear. He was gonna go to the mountains or underwater or wherever he was gonna go. He was planning to leave. The police immediately arrested him and brought him into custody. The bodies and remains of Connor and Laci Peterson were found on April 13th and April 14th of 2003, and within a week of finding those remains, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of a double homicide, which eventually opened the door to the death penalty. Scott's trial began on June 1st, 2004, and he pled not guilty to all charges. It was hard on the prosecution side because they didn't have like a weapon or necessarily stone cold like evidence that wasn't necessarily circumstantial that they could charge him with. They just had to go off of circumstantial evidence. Their bodies were 2 miles away from the Berkeley Marina, which is where Scott said that he was the day of Laci's disappearance. Scott Peterson never took the witness stand in his trial, and I watched an interview with one of the people that was in the courtroom during his trial and during his conviction, and they said that there was not a dry eye in the house. Everyone was crying their eyes out except Scott Peterson. On November 12th of 2004, Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder of his unborn son, Connor Peterson. Everyone was so incredibly relieved when Scott was officially and finally convicted. You can see there's videos on the internet of everyone just cheering in the streets when they heard the decision. Then on March 16th of 2005, Scott Peterson was officially sentenced to death by the form of a lethal injection, and he is still alive on death row today. He sits on death row at California San Quentin, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not exactly sure, prison, and it has been about 15 years since this all occurred. This case really just struck a chord with me, you guys. It's just really, really heartbreaking. Alright, you guys, it was the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed another true crime type of video. I really, really love making these ones. If you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Savannah. I make videos 3 days a week, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. You should subscribe, join the family. I love you guys more than life itself, and I will see you in a couple days with a brand new video. Bye, guys!